What's shaking and baking, everyone? My name is Kit, and welcome to Americans Learn. We have been on this fantastic journey of learning and understanding the Pacific War that took place during the Second World War. And joining me, as always, is my outstanding colleague, Daniel. He is in the house. Daniel, how are you doing, my friend?
Hey, good. It's another week, another recording, and another week into the war. It's really crazy to think that this show is sort of week by week, and we're filming this week by week. So we're like chronologically getting information at the same distance, which is kind of interesting to think about. I mean, it's not exactly. We're many years separated from these events, but it's just interesting to see that it kind of worked out like that.
Absolutely. And today we are going to be learning about the Battle of the Dutch East Indies. So obviously, we do want to have feedback from all of you, our viewing audience. So if there's anything we missed or stuff that you would wish to enlighten us about, please type in the comment section below. And we do like to get feedback from all of you. Plus, as a side note, very important to me, please support the original content creators, Kings and Generals. They put a lot of hours. I'm not going to give the exact number, but let's just say it is a lot of hours into making this content. So please support the original content creators, and also be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe, and hit that ring bell notification. That way you're made aware when we upload new content onto our YouTube channel. So there you go. But without further ado, since I'm in charge of the ones and twos, let's pull up this video and find out about the Battle of the Dutch East Indies.
After an entire month of fighting, and with both Malaya and the Philippines thrown against the ropes, the time had finally come for the final step of the Japanese advance. Now, the Dutch East Indies, the final link in their planned defensive chain across the Pacific, stood open for a Japanese attack. And as the Japanese prepared to execute one of their most bold and brilliant plans of invasion, the Malayan and Philippine fronts saw the start of strong Allied resistance. It is never too late for gifts, and the—
Oh, I know what gift that is, and no, we're not falling for that. Just want to throw that out there, folks. You know what? You don't need a piece of paper to call you a lord or a lady, because guess what? In my eyes, all of you are kings and queens. That's why we ask you to subscribe, because that's what wonderful royalty does. And that's why
they're not kings and queens, they're kings and generals.
Yes. After all, there you go. Yes, there you go. So never forget, in my eyes, that's how I view all of you. You don't need a piece of paper. Plus, in Scotland, lords are not recognized, at least in the
not on souvenir plots.
Yes, not on souvenir plots. But please support Kings and Generals. So there you go.
But to be fair to Kings and Generals, no one knew this at the time.
Yes.
And to be fair, I own 40 acres of land on Mars I'll never be able to claim. So I really am the last person that could ever fight anything like this.
Oh, Daniel, you're going to get a knock on the door. It's going to be Elon Musk. He's going to say, "Hey, I got a rocket ship. We're going to Mars." And you'd be like, "I'm out of here, Kit."
How much is the ticket? $200,000. I'll give you my land.
All right, let's play. Let's. All right, enough screwing around. Let's play this.
The year of 1942 didn't start as a normal and regular year for the Dutch. Their homeland, ravaged by war, was under the occupation of enemy Germans. Their government and their queen were in exile, helping the Allies in any manner they could. And their most important colony had become a target for Japanese expansion. But this colony was not defenseless at all, as Lieutenant General Heinter Porten counted with around 85,000 soldiers, with most of them concentrated at the island of Java. The Dutch also counted with a sizable naval force of 5 cruisers, 8 destroyers, 12 submarines, and 56 other ships, under the command of Lieutenant Admiral Conrad Helfrich, nicknamed Ship-a-Day Helfrich because he sank more Japanese ships in the first weeks of the war than the entire British or American navies together.
That's good old Lieutenant Admiral Shipperday.
That's a great nickname for an admiral.
Yeah, that is a Shipperday.
Let me clarify. It's either a great name or a terrible name.
Yeah. I am in. Hey, you know what? Let's get the audience. Type in the comment section below. Do you think it's a great nickname or a bad nickname?
Well, I think it's how you earn it.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. I agree. He got a great one, but then there's like the Russian Navy that in World War I that was like, no, that's ship a day in the wrong direction.
I think that was the Sino
Sino-Japanese War.
No, the Russian-Japanese War. Yeah, so the Russians were don't hurt us, Putin. The Russians were.
I'm not sure he could. He can't hurt. Right. I'm not going to even get into it, but he's having a hard time.
Yeah.
Do you remember?
Exactly.
Wait, do you remember that video? I remember which channel did it, where they were like, "Let's do a thing of like the U.S. Navy versus how they do against Russia and China," and so they spent the entire video doing a thing up against the U.S. versus China, and then they got to Russia and they're like, "Well, we were going to do a video on this." But then we saw what's happening, and we're not. There's not even worth doing a video.
Fair enough. But Shipperday, I like this Admiral Shipperday. Come on, Admiral Shipperday.
It's worth mentioning that Helfrich's small force of submarines was a formidable opponent for the Japanese Navy, sinking several of their ships, as we've seen in the previous weeks. Dutch air power was an important threat as well, having around 500 aircraft at their disposal, from which some 300 were front-line aircraft. These were based on several secret airfields scattered around the East Indies, such as Samarinda II or Singkawang II, to where Dutch planes would be transferred in case of war, trying to prevent their destruction by a Japanese air attack. These airfields were, however, quickly discovered by the invaders, then becoming vital strategic objectives and easy prey for Japanese bombers. For the invasion of the Dutch East Indies, the Japanese plan stipulated that they first needed to secure footholds on Malaya and the Philippines. After this was achieved, the Japanese would then launch an amphibious invasion of Borneo, making it the stepping stone from which to launch the invasion of the East Indies. Absolute coordination was essential for this operation, especially since the Indies were the most important target of the Japanese offensives due to its richness in petroleum oil, rubber, nickel, tin, scrap iron, and other strategic resources. The 16th Army, under Lieutenant General Imamura Hitoshi, was appointed by the commander of the Southern Expeditionary Army Group, General Hisaichi Terauchi, to carry out the invasion of the East Indies, supported by the 3rd Air Force once their operations in Malaya had concluded. Originally, this army was composed of the 2nd Division and the Sakaguchi Detachment, which took part in the conquests of Davao and Jolo, but Tokyo had also already planned for the 38th and 48th Divisions, as well as the South Seas Detachment and many other units, to be assigned to the 16th Army, as the capture of Hong Kong, the Philippines, Malaya, Guam, and Rabaul progressed. Initially supporting the invasion of the Philippines, the 3rd Fleet of Admiral Takahashi and its 11th Air Fleet were also appointed to support the Dutch East Indies campaign. The plan for the 16th Army was to launch a series.
Can you zoom back in? I just kind of want to read what's actually there. Just like a few seconds. No, a little further. Just when they're showing the ships. The ship detachment.
The South Seas Detachment and many other units to be assigned to the 16th Army, as the capture of Hong Kong, the Philippines, Malaya, Guam, and Rabaul progressed. Initially supporting the invasion of the Philippines, the 3rd Fleet of Admiral Takahashi and
keep going. Right. A second more with the Air Fleet.
Its 11th Air Fleet were also appointed to.
Okay, right there, perfect.
Wow.
Okay, so I just want to see what they actually got. They got a lot. I'm trying to see what their bigger ships are.
Well, they got predominantly battleships and
a lot of
cruisers and destroyers, submarines,
patrol
boats, transport ships, light cruisers, and 2 ships that are able to fly out seaplanes. So, yeah.
And it looks like the Air Fleet, I'm guessing, with the context we have, has carriers in it, but it's not showing them.
The 11th Air Fleet, I think it's more of a grounded base that's attached to the Army.
Oh, so they're just They're just jumping from wherever they take. They move their planes up. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I see no aircraft carriers here.
Yeah, that's
Support
fair.
the Dutch East Indies campaign.
Yeah, and pause it one more time. Yeah,
the
you're
plan
right.
for the six.
Yep.
Because I'm noticing that the amount of planes in each flotilla is more than a Japanese carrier could hold. So yeah, you're exactly right.
Yeah.
And so what do we have? Do we have actually? You mentioned battleships. Do we have any battleships? I just see cruisers, destroyers.
We see. Okay, well they're titled. Okay, so the first flagship in the Central Force is a light cruiser. It's a flagship. The second one is a heavy cruiser,
but it's not a battleship.
No. Okay, I was incorrect. These are all heavy and light cruisers. Oops. Okay.
And then and then a bunch of smaller patrol boats and sub chasers, and try to see if there's any submarines in here.
Yes, there is.
Where are they?
Yes, there is. They are in. Let me go see it. Submarines. Okay, I got that wrong. Those are seaplane ships. Yeah. I was incorrect.
Interesting. So I guess it makes sense that the submarines are sort of just kind of like spread out other places.
Yeah. All of these are sub cruisers, heavy cruisers, minesweepers, transport ships, seaplane ships, destroyers. Yeah.
It's an invasion force. They're just there to get people there.
Yep. That's it. Okay. Well, who says you can't get your learn on by looking at the maps? Always important.
16th Army was to launch a series of naval invasions against key points in the Dutch East.
Go ahead.
Also, I wish there was a graph in the background that's like Japan's oil supply.
That would be good to know because, again, the Dutch East Indies, they got that oil, that Texas tea.
East Indies, namely some of the secret airfields that we've discussed, as the Japanese would need air support from these points for their planned invasion of Java. This plan, drafted by the leading commanders of the Third Fleet, was very specific about where and when each unit would carry out the invasion operations. After securing Davao and Jolo, the Sekiguchi detachment would land on Tarakan Island around the 33rd day after the start of the war, then launching an invasion of Balikpapan 10 days later. Once Balikpapan was in Japanese hands, General Sekiguchi would naval invade Banjarmasin around the 53rd day, before finally landing on Bali some 16 days later.
I just got to say, while I am impressed with the logistics and coordination, holding a territory like this in the supposed island chain, I mean, the thing is, you have to take into account, eventually there's going to be a resistance movement, because let's face it, the Empire of Japan was extremely brutal in regards to being occupiers. At the same time, too, like logistically, how are you going to maintain this? It makes no sense whatsoever. And because of, I guess, obviously their foreign policy, their domestic or occupation policy will be just as brutal. It's unsustainable. You cannot sustain something like this.
Meanwhile, after taking Hong Kong, 2 battalions of the 38th Division would assemble in Palau to seize Ambon and then attack Kupang on Timor Island, while the rest of the division would be appointed to launch the invasion of southern Sumatra. Finally, the main force of this army would execute the invasion of the island of Java. The 2nd Division would be responsible for the landings in western Java, while the 48th Division would take charge of the invasion of eastern Java. The 3rd Fleet's Sasebo force of SNLF Marines and Yokosuka force of paratroopers would also be responsible for the subsequent capture of Manado, Kandari, and Makassar in the Celebes, while also assisting in the operations against Timor. By January 3rd, with the rapid advances in the Malayan and Philippine fronts, and with the successful capture of British Borneo, the Japanese command finally felt ready to start the Dutch East Indies campaign. On January 6th, Takahashi's fleet arrived in Davao, where the Sekiguchi detachment had already concentrated. The following day, the invasion force departed Malalag Bay, heading towards Tarakan Island in Dutch Borneo. They were escorted by a fleet consisting of 9 destroyers and a light cruiser, under the command of Rear Admiral Nishimura Shoji. Meanwhile, the Dutch had a garrison of around 1,400 men in Tarakan, led by Lieutenant Colonel Simon de Val. This force had prepared defensive positions, expecting a Japanese attack to the west, Yet they were to be surprised. On January 10th, Dutch reconnaissance detected the Japanese convoy en route to Tarakan, so de Waal ordered the destruction of all oil installations on the island.
Brilliant move. If you can't hold it, at least make their lives a living hell. Deprive the enemy of what they want. Make sure that their objective is unattainable at all costs.
He also sent some bombers to disrupt the landings, but to no avail, as by the early hours of January 11th, after the official declaration of war on the Netherlands, some SNLF Marines and Sakaguchi's main force had already landed north of the Amal River. They then marched south to the mouth of the river under a burning red sky, where they stormed and outflanked some Dutch pillboxes. A battalion of the Sakaguchi detachment also landed further south at Tanjuang Bateau to capture the Linkas oil fields. This unit tried to advance through the jungle, but was slowed down by the extremely dense vegetation. Sakaguchi also lost communications with them, so the Japanese general didn't know of their whereabouts. At the same time, aided by a Japanese guide who knew the area, Sakaguchi's main force broke through the jungle and got to the north side of the Tarakan oil field by midday. As the Japanese advanced north of the Tarakan oil field, the Dutch bombarded them with artillery and mortars far from Celebes' support point. The Dutch and Japanese made several simultaneous offensives against each other, but eventually the Japanese landed a series of night raids, and Yamamoto's troops managed to capture both lines of Dutch barracks.
Okay, pause it real quick.
The defenders had also...
One thing I'm noticing really repeatedly is that Japan is clearly the best out there at night attacks, because they always do night attacks, and they're always like the most successful thing that they do because no one else is prepared for a night attack, it seems.
You know, I think in many ways it is something that they learned, the Empire of Japan learned throughout its continuous ongoing war. I mean, this is one of the, I guess, horrible things about the Meiji Restoration, and that is Japan wanted to be on par with the Western powers, and in order to do so, it had to compete against European and, yes, even the United States and Canada, powers that were already technologically advanced for the time. And seeing as how all these other colonial powers were treating their territories and in Asia and Southeast Asia, Japan wanted to make sure it could stand up for itself. But all the while, it became something far on par being as brutal as all the other powers. And they've been doing these ongoing continuous wars since Meiji came into power, and now up to the Second World War. It's just quite impressive of just some of the skill sets they learned, and how the Allies, all of them, the Americans, the Dutch, the British, were just caught completely unprepared.
Yeah.
They lost many men, and their communications with the coastal batteries were breaking down. This left de Waal with no choice but to capitulate on the morning of January 12th. Yet without communications, some Dutch units were still fighting on. One of these units was the Karaengan Battery, which came into contact with the Japanese battalion that had lost communications around noon. Yet despite the sustained attack, the Karaengan Battery accurately shot and sunk 2 Japanese minesweepers and 1 landing craft. The battery was finally captured on January 13th, subjected to the Japanese's vengeance for the loss of their minesweepers, who...
In an act of revenge on January 18th, 215 Dutch prisoners from Tarakan were drowned at sea. God, what a horrible way to go. God almighty.
Then executed most of its
It's like,
crew.
wait, pause it. It's like Japan's at war, and they're like, oh no, we lost things. Let's make these guys suffer. Man, I really hope people don't hold us to that account in the future. They don't, because literally they created communist China, but communist China also saved them from real repercussions after the war.
Sakaguchi had lost only 7 men in the entire battle, while the IJN lost around 250 men, mainly in the destroyed minesweepers. In contrast, the Dutch lost around 300 men, with the rest ending up captured. The same day that the Sakaguchi detachment was landing on Tarakan, Rear Admiral Takagi Takeo started the IJN operation in the Celebes. An invasion fleet under Rear Admiral Tanaka Raizo, consisting of 3 cruisers and 11 destroyers, escorted the Sasebo force, consisting of 3,200 SNLF Marines, while some 762 paratroopers from the Yokosuka force prepared to be dropped onto the Langoan airfield. The main force of Sasebo would land around Manado to envelop the Dutch defenders and capture the town, with another force of 1,400 SNLF Marines also landing at Kema to help the paratroopers secure the airfield. In the Celebes, Colonel Marinus Voren had substantial forces under his command, spread across 3 major areas: Manado, Kendari, and Makassar. Manado was defended by around 1,500 men, under Major Ben Schilmuller, mainly from the National Reserve Battalion. In the early morning of January 11th, the Sasebo force came ashore at Manado and Kume, repulsing a small number of Dutch units and heading towards the Langoan airfield. A couple of hours later, the Yokosuka force was dropped on Langoan, where the paratroopers managed to completely seize the airfield. In response to the strong Japanese attack, the defenders retreated to Tinor, where they were finally crushed by the SNLF Marines by noon. With the fall of Manado, Tomohon, and Tondano, Schilmuller had decided by night to retreat with most of his forces to the west, towards Amurang, where he would commence guerrilla warfare.
I just gotta say, where's Ship-a-Day? Come on, Admiral Ship-a-Day. You gotta earn your namesake. Come on, dude. Where you at? Get in the game.
Yeah, this is like mile an hour.
Yeah, this is but again, I have to give a huge shout out to the commander who says, okay, let's engage in guerrilla warfare, which is, I think, the only way you could really hurt the professional army of the Empire of Japan at this point. Conventional warfare, going toe-to-toe with them, is not going to work. You got to fight dirty. You're not going to win a big battle, which means you have to be the resistance to an occupation force. You know the terrain better, and you could hurt them better with small operations, hurting infrastructure, blowing up bridges, blowing up power lines. I mean, that's what's needed. And that really should have been the adopted tactic. Like maybe one area seen as like, oh, here's where you're going to engage in conventional warfare, but the rest, everyone, you're going to small man teams, doing guerrilla operations. You must be self-sustainable. I don't know. Maybe that's what I would have done, but it's easy for me to sit here and be an armchair general, you know?
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, an armchair king in general.
An armchair king and general. There you go. Maybe that's what we should call ourselves, armchair kings and generals.
The Japanese parachuted a company of reinforcements to Manado. Soon all the Japanese forces made contact at Langoan and captured the city. With Schilmuller's retreat, some scattered Dutch units also started to wage guerrilla warfare.
Good.
So the Dutch formed in total 5 guerrilla groups, operating separately. This paratroop operation at Manado was the first ever carried out by Japanese forces, and it was a complete success. The Sasebo force would finally remain in Manado until January 16th to carry out mopping up operations, although most of the guerrilla groups would manage to escape them.
Well done.
The successful capture of Tarakan and Manado signified the start of the Dutch East Indies campaign, and this was something that deeply concerned the ABDA command. Yet this week, the Allies had their hands already full in some other regions. In the Philippines, for instance, fighting started in the Abaque line back on January 9th, when General Homa sent the 65th Independent...
Gee, Dan, remember this? We talked about this last week? That mountain? Boy, oh boy, I sure hope no one gets the big brain idea of climbing a mountain.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's like high... It's high IQ. To watch something like this, you must have a high IQ. Good thing no one knows how to climb mountains.
Mixed Brigade and the 7th Tank Regiment to push south on the East Road and break through the 2nd Corps' positions. Facing the Japanese attack were General Parker's 41st and 51st Divisions, as well as the elite 57th Regiment of Philippine Scouts. These defenders quickly rushed to rain heavy artillery fire over the Japanese advance, inflicting heavy casualties on the enemy. At the same time, the Japanese 122nd Regiment moved west towards the 1st Corps area and captured the town of Olongapo. The following day, The main attack began against the Abaque line as the Japanese forces advanced upon the western sector of the line. To bolster the morale of his troops, General MacArthur himself decided to visit the front lines, although this would be his only trip to Bataan during the battle. Despite the progress of the Japanese advance, the heavy bombardment carried out by the American defenders forced Lieutenant General Nara Akira of the 65th Independent Mixed Brigade to push his forces further west. On the night of January 11th, the first Japanese units started to cross the Calagueman River against the positions of the 57th Regiment. The Philippine scouts resisted attack after attack from Nara's forces, executing well-planned counterattacks that always managed to regain most of the lost territory. Parker also saw the difficult situation in which his troops were, and so he decided to reinforce them with his reserves. Elsewhere in the center of the line, though, the Japanese had successfully pushed back the 41st Division, and in the far western sector, the battered 51st Division was being attacked repeatedly, which left it very close to completely crumbling. Furthermore, on January 15th, Nara found a seam between the 41st and 51st Divisions, and quickly set out to exploit his newfound opportunity. Parker ordered a counterattack early on January 16th, which managed to push back the Japanese a little bit. Yet Nara saw this coming and planned to envelop the Filipino troops once they had advanced. This left the 51st completely exposed and rapidly collapsing. That same day, the 122nd Regiment moved south towards Morong, where its advance was...
Hey, it's the Cavalry Regiment. Gotta love them. Hang in there, my horse boys. Hang in there. Hang in there strong. And don't worry, MacArthur. The Marines will take back the Philippines for you. We got you, buddy. We got you.
Finally stopped by the 26th Cavalry Regiment. Despite their successful horse-mounted charge, which would be the last U.S. cavalry regiment to engage in horse-mounted warfare, General Wainwright had no other choice but to withdraw on January 17th. Due to the lack of food, they would end up butchering their mounts to survive and convert into two squadrons, one motorized rifle squadron and a mechanized squadron.
No! My heart can't take it.
I don't think they're a cavalry regiment anymore. I think they were temporarily a chef's kitchen.
If you've eaten horse, type in the comment section below. What does it taste like? Does it feel like tears? Because we lost our horses. My heart. This war's too much for me.
Back on the Abaque line, MacArthur sent the Philippine Division and his last reserves to plug the gap left by the 51st Division. If this position fell, then his entire main battle position might disintegrate in the blink of an eye. But would the Americans be successful? We'll have to wait until next week to see. For now, we turn to Malaya, where the Indian defenders were still retreating towards Johor to establish new defensive positions. The 8th Australian Division of General Bennett had already moved to the area around Segamat, and they would be joined by the 9th Indian Division and the recently arrived 45th Brigade to form West Force under the command of Bennett himself. Their task was to stop the Japanese advance at Johor, while at the same time giving the Indian forces enough time to rest and replenish. Meanwhile, General Yamashita planned to threaten the British defense by landing a strong force at Endau on the southeastern coast of Malaya.
Wow.
He also wanted to give his tired 5th Division enough time to rest at Seremban, while maintaining the Imperial Guards Division's advance along the coast. On the evening of January 11th, Kuala Lumpur was occupied by the Japanese, and by January...
I like how one regiment's called the Imperial Guards, No relation to my favorite faction in this other sci-fi fantasy, but all right, Imperial Guards, there you go.
13th, the Indians were withdrawing through West Force. The following day, the Australians were planning to execute an ambush led by Lieutenant Colonel Frederick Blackjack Galligan, west of the Gemmas, to finally stop the Japanese momentum. Bennett had placed his Australian brigades on the expected main area of Japanese advance, supported by anti-tank units and 4 artillery regiments. On the afternoon of January 14th, an advance unit of the 5th Division fell into the trap. As a result, The Japanese suffered heavy casualties and were forced to retreat. Yet, despite the success of the Australian ambush, by dawn on the next day, the Imperial Guards Division of Lieutenant General Nishimura Takuma was approaching the Moa area on the coast, which was protected by the 45th Brigade. Nishimura sent one battalion through the Moa River to flank both the town and the Indian defenders, while his main force was advancing from the north. On the night of January 15th, Japanese soldiers landed on the south bank of the river, facing almost no resistance, and by January 16th, they had outflanked and routed an entire Indian company. The remaining Indian defenders were then cut off and captured by Nishimura's forces, who then continued upstream towards the town of Moa. Australian artillery managed to stop their advance there, but some Japanese soldiers had already crossed the river and were decimating the remaining Indian defenders. By night, the 45th Brigade had been virtually destroyed, and both Moa and its harbour had fallen into Japanese hands. Australian forces at Gemas had also been attacked by the Japanese on January 15th, repulsing 3 attacks before finally being flanked and forced to retreat by the 17th. The loss of Gemas had deprived the Australians of much equipment, while the fall of Moa had left a critical hole in the communications of Westforce. The Allied command knew that they needed to hold the Japanese advance there if they wanted to have a real chance at holding Johor. Back on January 13th, the British had received their second reinforcement, the 53rd Brigade of the still coming 18th British Division.
And so at this point, no, the battle is looking lost.
This brigade didn't have sufficient time for recuperating after being at sea for 11 weeks, yet General Percival decided to send it anyway to stop the Japanese at Moa. This was a critical point in the battle and in the defense of Malaya, but this is also the end of the week, so we have to leave you here for now. Next week we're going to talk about the continuation of the battles at Abukay and Moa, as well as the invasions of New Britain and Balikpapan. Once again,
All right, we're not going to acknowledge the established titles, so there you go. But wow, already the Allies are still being steamrolled, folks. It's not looking good for the Dutch East Indies, and it's quite clear that the Empire of Japan is moving forward with its plan to occupy the territories, get the resources it needs to continue on its war economy. But boy, what's the turnaround point, Daniel?
It's crazy. It's interesting that, again, it feels like, so they had, it was interesting. They had that ambush at the end, and it succeeded, but it wasn't a strategic ambush. It was just a tactical ambush that worked. And it's like, oh no, you hit our greater flanking force in our reconnaissance division. Oh well, we'll just keep going forward without it.
Again, folks, just even watching this series, it's just it's incredible, the logistics and the technology that was used. We I think we're kind of, especially here in America, I think we're so used to the technology that we have now. It's kind of even though it was like 80 or 90 years ago from the Second World War, it's just incredible what they were able to do with even their amount of technology. So, folks, as always, Kings and Generals is enlightening us about, well, the entire Pacific War. I think we're all learning things that we have never learned before in regards to how our schools teach us about the Second World War. And I'm looking forward to having all of you join us again when we continue on this adventure in the Pacific War. Keep your heads on a swivel and, it's a heavy heart. Rest in peace, horses of the cavalry. Rest in peace. You think the army will ever have cavalry again, Daniel?
I don't think so. I think maybe we send them to Germany because we don't need them.
Oh, well, yeah. All right. If you can't tell,
I'm happy that they now are more like an infantry division. This seems to be more effective.
Oh, wow. My friend is all on board with getting rid of the horses. Whatever. Time to eat up, right?
Well, they were very hungry.
Oh, Wilbur. Rest in peace. All right, we're up out of here. I'm Kit. This is Daniel. Please support the original content creators and also support Americans Learn. Be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe and hit that ring bell notification. Take care and keep your heads on a swivel.